This is the Bates Bobcast, our weekly podcast that takes a look at the week that was in Bates athletics. My name is Aaron Morrison. This week we're chatting with former Bates All-American pitcher Thom Freeman from the class of 1963. It's his class's 60th reunion this weekend, and he chats with us about the legacy of his late classmate Howie Vandersea, whose football jersey is being retired on Saturday. Plus, a recap of the 2023 IRA National Championship with rowing head coach Peter Steenstra. And we wrap up the 2023 school year with an interview with outgoing Bates president Clayton Spencer. That's coming up on the Bates Bobcast. In late December, Bates football and baseball legend Howie Vandersea from the class of 1963 died at the age of 81. This Saturday, his football jersey number 56 will be retired at Bates' reunion. Classmate Thom Freeman was one of the leaders in the drive to get Vandersea's jersey retired. The two were teammates on the Bates baseball team, and Freeman shares his memories of Howie on this week's Bobcast.
Thom, first of all, take us back when you were first coming to Bates. When you first met Howie, I know you were obviously baseball teammates at the Bobcats, but what was your first maybe impressions of Howie when you met him?
Well, we both came under similar circumstances. When we set foot on campus, we were the first in our first generation in our families to go to college. We came on campus and we stood out as two tall redheads with beanies on. You had to wear beanies in our day, and the women had to wear bibs. But anyway, he started playing football right away, and I didn't really get into the gym until basketball tryouts. But at that time, we crossed paths quite often and got to be friends. That's kind of how it started.
Certainly. Well, I know Howie had some legendary power on the baseball team, right? Tell us a little bit about, how much of a power hitter he was, first baseman, right?
Yes, he was. And when he got a hold of one, goodbye. He was so strong, big and strong. And I remember a story when he started playing baseball for Chick. I guess the team was having bunting practice. So Howie said to Chick, should I take bunting practice? So Chick said to him, in the 4 years you're here, you will never bunt. So he wanted to take advantage of his power. He was so supportive on the baseball field as well as on the football field. And his vigor and his joy of the game was equally wonderful. And he always was willing to help and guide and be supportive to teammates, both on the football field and baseball field.
Yeah, I was going to say, Thom, I know you didn't play football yourself, but what was it like watching Howie do his thing out there back in the day when he never left the field, right?
Exactly. We all went to the games and saw number 56, always in the middle of a play, whether on offense or defense. In those days, he played both ways, which it wasn't unusual, but it wasn't a standard. So he had to have the strength and stamina to withstand the whole game. On the baseball field, he was just as avid and just as much of a team player.
Yeah, you touched on his leadership. I mean, it seems like his leadership is really what made him special. Maybe you could expand on that a little bit and what kind of leader he was.
Well, everybody knows of his football ability, but only people who played with him, either in football or baseball, were exposed to the things he did and said to his teammates. And as I said before, it was always encouragement, never downgrading anybody, whether they made a bad play or not. And I think everyone that played with him felt that way. And from what I've read and heard, it was the same way in his coaching career, being very supportive and teaching. And it certainly was evidenced by those who played for him in college, because to a T, they came back to support him, say hello to him, and it exemplified everyone's respect for Howie.
Do you have a favorite Howie story from his time at Bates you wanted to mention?
There isn't any one story. You know what? It's a story of his life and the way he was. And we got to be dorm mates the last 2 years. We lived in a corner of Smith South, and there were 4 rooms, all with athletes, except one had the sports editor for the student newspaper, and that was Howie's roommate. So there were 3 or 4 football players, a couple of 3 baseball players, for a total of 8 altogether, anyway. And so it was like an enclave, and it was very seldom that there wasn't somebody coming up and down stairs, either from a game or a practice. And so it yielded the great friendships that have lasted my whole life. And when you go to college, things get more serious. You belong to a team. And I always felt that the team counted on us to do our best. It was important to us not to let them or ourselves down. The concept of being a teammate was invaluable.
Individually, you both had similar accolades, right? You were an All-American in baseball. He was an All-American in football, and you both attempted to play professionally. And you in baseball, he in football. But what were those parallels kind of like? Right after college, sort of.
As you noted, we both chased the brass ring of athletics after college. Howie with the Bears, and myself spent 4 years at it with the New York Yankees minor league system. And when we would get together, we'd always tell the same old war stories about our experiences in professional sports. And it was fun. And I won't get into my side. This isn't about me. It's about Howie. So I know he had 2 or 3 tryouts and finally tossed it in, just as I did after 4 years. I had to get a real job. And Howie went into education and coaching. I went into the business world with IBM and spent my career there. But we would get together either by phone or in person at reunions, athletic events, and it was always a great experience, especially the last 15 years when we would meet to play golf. We would go down to what was called the Rucci Open in Westerly, Rhode Island. About 7 or 8 of us every summer would go down and play golf. And most of the folks that I mentioned earlier were part of that. And so we had a chance to meet up besides just on reunions. But I will say the last dozen years, because of the advent of the internet and email, it just increased our contact and our discussions, our bantering about all kinds of things on almost a daily basis. It was sports or it was politics, national events, families. We got to know each other's families in this group just about through the advent of email. So that further increased the bond that we all had. And Howie was certainly an important part of that. He was intelligent. He was insightful. He wanted to hear every side of an argument. And we enjoyed his responses to whatever the issue was.
And now with Howie having his football jersey number retired, I mean, obviously I know you're going to be at reunion. Like how much are you looking forward to this ceremony? Because he's only the 4th Bates football player to have his jersey retired.
Absolutely. I'm tremendously eager to watch his family accept that award. I know he's going to be there in spirit, and I'm going to be there in his spirit. So looking forward to seeing Craig, Debbie, and Sarah Jean. And I might add one other thing. Back in 2016, I was inducted into the Maine Baseball Hall of Fame. Most of that was a result of Howie's efforts on my behalf. He kind of headed up letters of recommendation from 4 or 5 of my classmates or alums. He coordinated everything, put the information together, and sent it to the committee, which accepted it. So in some respects, this, my recognition wouldn't have happened without his hard work. And that's one of the reasons I sent the prospective letter to the Bates powers to be back in February and asking them to consider this retirement of Howie's number 56. And I was delighted when they agreed. And the rest is history. And so on Saturday in the tent, it'll be a wonderful day.
Awesome. Well, any other thoughts you wanted to share? I know Howie was a big reason the class of 63 is pretty close, right? In terms of, his efforts with their reunions through the years. But anything else you wanted to mention about him that we haven't gotten to talk about?
Well, I would just say that back in our time, our class was only about 200 people, half men and half women. So it was a situation where you got to know almost everybody, especially if you were a man, you got to know all the guys, and vice versa for the women. So I think it built up a close relationship, which Howie enjoyed and utilized throughout his life. And we all tried to do that. And so that was another part of his legacy, and being involved with reunions too. And all the work he did for the organizations affiliated with football, like the National Football Foundation, he more or less got Maine into it and led that group for 25 years. And he was also honored for many other coaching achievements and memberships to groups. So it wasn't just the recognition from Bates, it's the recognition from the coaching community that knew and experienced his activity.
Yeah, I know the National Football Foundation. It's the Howie Vandersea chapter right here in Maine, so named after him.
Right. Yep.
All right. Well, Thom, thank you so much for joining us today on the Bobcast, and looking forward to having you at reunion here this Saturday for the jersey retirement.
My pleasure, and I hope I get to meet you in person.
Last weekend was the final event of the school year for Bates Athletics, as the men's rowing team competed Friday and Saturday at the IRA National Championship Regatta. The Bobcats finished in third place as a team, with the first varsity 8 winning a bronze medal in the D3 Grand Final, the first medal at the IRA National Championship in program history. Head coach Peter Steenstra fills us in on the men's team's development throughout the season and the legacy his senior class is leaving at Bates.
They certainly developed well. We were very happy with the result at the IRA. They got both boats really put down very good races, very tight finishes at the end. Having that 1V come 8/100ths away from pulling in front of Wesleyan was really exciting, and walking around the boatyard and stuff, here I am getting compliments from other coaches and stuff, and people as big as the top end of Ivy League and whatnot were stopping me to say that was quite a race. So that when you're walking around and people are paying attention to the Division III races, that they're just fans of the sport. So that was clearly a significant performance that those guys put down, and it was great to watch. And the 2V, they weren't chumps at all on that thing. They put everything they had into it, and that boat had, we had to have a last minute change there with putting Andrew Fry in. He bumped up from the 3V, and so he got himself into that position really well. And Kean did a good job working with that boat in the week that I was away at NCAA's. So we had a little bit of a lineup change even within the guys that were already there, and I think that helped them out a little bit as well. So whether or not it made the difference between fifth place and fourth place, I don't know, but it certainly got them a lot closer into that medals group, and it was really exciting to watch.
Excellent. And then you touched on the fact that the D3 races, obviously. This was the second year they've had a D3 race, and this is the first year they had a 2V D3 race specifically. What's the environment like for IRAs, the experience of going when it's an open regatta like it was in 2018 where you're competing against Harvard and Yale versus when you're only going up against boats that you normally do see throughout the year anyway?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very different experience.
Yeah.
When you have to go through heats and reps, and then the semifinal, I'm doing my best to boost them up for that experience and to say, you know what, there is something that can happen here, but typically you're kind of hoping that one of those bigger programs, someone makes a mistake, right? Because that creates an opportunity, and if you're in the right place at the right time, then you can take advantage of it. But this experience was more of here are your peers, here are guys that are similar to you in their experience and their size and their strength, and this is a group that's a good measurement of who you are, and these are the people you want to compare yourselves to. So instead of it being kind of like a shoot for the stars and land on the moon type thing, this is clearly a race where we should expect to be competitive, and the hope is to be competing for that top spot someday.
You mentioned the seniors in a write-up about the regatta. Tell us a little bit more about what they've meant to this program.
Yeah, the seniors, it was a small group, but they really did a good job. Even I'll say that like Sam Marchman, who came in, he started as a sophomore, I believe, and so he had no rowing experience, and he was a good athlete just naturally, and he brought something to that group, which was some age and some maturity and some wisdom and some stoicism, and he just sat there and pulled hard and came in and asked good questions, and he was a solid member of the program. I can go on and on about Aiden Braithwaite there, Brady. That's a tough role to be a coxswain, and he did grow quite a bit from beginning to end, to the point that at the end here, with those top coxswains, I give them a lot more responsibility than even the younger coxswains. Mm-hmm. So I'm treating them like an assistant coach. They have to run a practice when I'm not around, and Kean obviously was with 2V or 3V or 4V or whatever other boats he was dealing with. So there were a number of occasions where Brady was out on his own with that first boat, and on top of that, he had first years on board there, and so when you have that type of youth within the boat, talent, no doubt, high level of talent, but there's youth there, and so it requires that sort of constant supervision, I think is a good way to put it. Yeah. And you don't want to put it all on the captains that may or may not be on board. You want to have a coxswain who can run the show from that seat, and that's exactly what Brady did. And I'm just very pleased with the man he became, so to speak, and I think he did a good job. And Bates and BMAC, we can talk forever about those two, but they were a good pair. They worked well together as captains. They each had their own strengths. Timmy did a good job as far as learning something about being vulnerable, being honest, being open with me and with his teammates. He started to realize that he doesn't have to do it all by himself, and was able to take some time in order to make sure he was going to be the best he could be come race day. And BMAC, he's an old soul, and he's that little guy that sits in bow who there was no question as to whether or not he was going to be in that position, because he put everything he had into it. He got himself into a competitive spot through the ergometer, but just who he is as a sculler and a small boat specialist, he was the guaranteed person for that bow seat, because he just does such a good job up there and provides such a great amount of leadership. I'm just very impressed with him.
Excellent. So obviously for you as a coach, you touched on this, how you have NCAAs for the women, and then a week later you have IRAs for the men. At least they weren't the same week this year. I think 1 year they were the same week. But, you rely a lot on your assistants, but maybe tell us a little bit more about how you balance, these two big regattas, at the very end of the year here.
Well, I think we're doing okay with balancing it. I wouldn't say that we've got it completely figured out. It helped a lot that they were both in New Jersey. Sure. So having one in Florida versus one in New Jersey, and even if they were separate weeks, it would still be a real challenge.
Yeah.
This so much depends on not just the assistant coaches. Obviously, Keena and Carly do a phenomenal job, and then the Coxes as well. And it requires a lot from them, but the team in general, right? Unfortunately, this is always going to be the setup where it's either going to be the same weekend or it'll be NCAA's first, followed by IRA. And we know that in 2025, if we're lucky enough to get there again, it's going to be in Sacramento, California. So we could have the NCAA could be the week before, someplace like Florida or who knows where. I'm sure it's listed. I just haven't looked this far ahead.
Right.
And then the IRA out on the West Coast. That's going to be a real difficult thing to pull off. Yeah. Is how do I be in three places at once? So it all just depends on that maturity of the team. And quite frankly, if I've done my job properly, then they really don't need me at either race. They can do it all on their own. The assistant coaches know exactly what to do and what adjustments need to be made or not made. It turns into just pure management of people, and really, I think that we've done such a good job preparing them to begin with that come that time of year, either they're in a good position to fight for that spot or they're not. And I don't think my presence is going to really make the big difference.
Great. So what's your focus on this summer here, preparing for the fall season that the rowing teams get to have?
I got to get the lawn mowed for one thing.
Yeah, me too.
Been away for 14 days, and it rained in the middle, so we didn't have a whole lot of extra time. Well, no, it's kind of wrapping everything up, quite honestly. And there's a lot of awards out there that a lot of recognition to be sort of plugged for. So we're working on getting all that stuff done. The team once again brought a bunch of trophies and things into the office, so I got to get all those updated. But yeah, no, it's mostly recruiting and doing all the things that we do all summer long, fixing equipment, getting all that stuff done.
Yeah, the 2V boat for the women got a little dinged up. So
a little bit, a little bit of a love tap there going into the starters block, but just cosmetic.
Sure. Well, any other thoughts you wanted to share on IRAs that we haven't got to talk about yet?
I can't say that there's something pressing. I'm just so impressed with the men's team at the moment. We have a lot of youth, and it's so encouraging to first just get to that spot, but then have a team that showed that there's some dynamic aspect to them. They have the ability to change. They have the ability to react to what's going on around them. I think if there's something we're working on a little bit, it's being fully bought into the program and fully bought into their teammates. But that's a standard thing that happens when you bring in a large group of first years. So as that's developing, I think that this program has a long way to go upward. And, to end on, to be third in the country, right, in Division III, to say that we have a long way to go up, I think that this current group, with the incoming freshmen that we've got coming in, really has the ability to get into that top spot if they want to.
To wrap up the final Bobcast of the school year, we sit down with outgoing Bates president Clayton Spencer to wrap up her tenure at Bates and look towards the future. Well, on the season finale of the Bobcast, we are happy to have president of Bates College, Clayton Spencer, who is stepping down after a decade plus of great leadership here at Bates. And Clayton, thank you, first of all, so much for joining us. I know we've had you on a few times before, but really appreciate having you here. Just to start, I'm curious, after a decade plus here, stepping away, the connection between higher education and athletics is something that people talk about a lot. And I just kind of was curious about your viewpoint. Has it changed much over the years, or is it pretty similar to what you thought kind of coming in?
Sure. Well, the first thing to say about that connection between education and athletics is that it's a distinctly American tradition. If you go over to Europe or England or whatever, the Ted Lasso thing is happening somewhere else, and you're at the university to study. There's a little bit of sports here and there, but not the big sports machine of American higher education. And it's particularly important in the NESCAC, which is, because it's Division III, but excellent Division III, athletics at a place like Bates or any of the colleges in the NESCAC allow for that scholar-athlete experience and a team experience that's integrated into the liberal arts culture in a way that is enriching both for the athletes and students themselves and for the college as a whole. It's really important, if you're a NESCAC college, to have a strong athletics program. It's big in terms of recruiting because we have a lot of students who come wanting to have, they're really good, curious students with high ambitions who don't plan to be professional athletes after college, but they want that collegiate experience. And I think the NESCAC and the liberal arts is the quintessential version of that.
Excellent. And I know we've seen you obviously at many Bates athletic sporting events through the years. I'm curious about some of your favorite memories of watching the Bobcats in action.
Wow. That's a tall order because there have been lots of highlights. So let me just crank back in my mind here. Okay. 2017, undefeated regular season for men's lacrosse with Charlie Fay and the gang tearing up the turf on Garcelon Field. I don't think I missed a single game home then. I even traveled to go watch them. It was amazing. And I didn't know anything about lacrosse, but I sat with the extremely committed Bates lacrosse parents, and they taught me everything I know, and I've become a real fan as a result. Another thing, lower key maybe, I love seeing our women's cross-country track students in the afternoons or in the early mornings running out in packs, like out College Street the full distance. As far as I'm concerned, they probably go to Sabatis to train, and we have had a history of an excellent track and field and cross-country teams, and it has been definitely a factor the whole time I've been here. Last fall, I was super excited to see the football team come alive. I think you can correct me, Aaron, but I think they had 3 wins this year in the first year of Coach Matt Coyne, who is on it. I mean, he is totally all in. He was playing last year, got 3 wins without even having his own recruits.
Right.
This year, he's done an amazing job recruiting, and I am super excited to sneak back over to Bates and watch those football games this coming fall. Another huge highlight was earlier in my tenure watching the Delpeche twins, Marcus and Malcolm, playing for John Furbush and men's basketball. Went to all those games, and they were awesome. So awesome, in fact, that they've spent the last 6 years playing professional ball in Europe and England. And I was excited to see the other day that they are coming back to Bates this summer to coach in Coach Furbush's summer camp. So I think that's great. And I am bummed that I'm not going to be here to see them. Although I may be. I think maybe they're coming this month. I might get in one more look at the Delpeche twins before I leave on June 30th. Another thing that has fascinated me, but I have not yet conquered, is trying to figure out how volleyball works. I go in there. Those women are so athletic. It's awesome. But I haven't quite figured out. It seems like you can only hit the ball 3 times, and then you better get it on the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah, but and then of course there's women's rowing and men's rowing, which is great. But the women have been national champions 5 times. Our women's varsity 2, I think, just won its 9th goal in a row. So that is pretty darn cool. And one of my favorite parts about women's rowing is there have been any number of commencements where the women have had to be away that weekend for the national championships. And the big question is, can they get back in time to walk across the stage? So a few times I've been sitting there, we get to the end of the alphabet, and then these very tall, strong-looking women appear at the back of the line, and it's the rowers who are seniors who've just gotten back, and I have the pleasure of giving them their diplomas. And then because I'm a basketball nut, grew up in North Carolina basketball country, I got to call out women's basketball, the NESCAC Championship, with the incredible trio of Megan Graff, Mia Roy, and Ari Dahlia leading the whole season. That was an amazing year, and I was down at the game in Hartford. Megan cut me off a piece of the net, which I'm in the process of moving from the president's house to my new house, and I have that sort of secured away so that that little piece of net will not get lost in the move. So it's been a source of pure joy to watch athletics while I was at Bates.
Yeah, absolutely. That was such an awesome year last year, and really felt like a real breakthrough for Bates athletics and with the women's basketball team winning that title. In terms of the future, though, of Bates athletics, right? I mean, we have incoming president Gary Jenkins. What would you or have you said to him about what he can expect in terms of and what's important about athletics at Bates? Because 31 varsity sports, that's a lot.
Yeah. Well, I have a rule with my incoming successor, Gary Jenkins, who I think will be fabulous. And that is, I'm not going to answer any question he doesn't ask me. And
Right.
Guess what? He asked me about athletics. And it's very clear he understands the importance and the role of athletics in a NESCAC college. So I admitted frankly to him, I wish I'd made a lot more progress in terms of fundraising for athletics, for making sure we've got our coaching staffs solidly supported and secured, improving our facilities. And I think that's already on his list as an early priority. I don't want to speak for him, but it certainly was a priority that Eric Fouché in Advancement and I have been pounding away on this year. So I know he gets the plot.
Excellent. And then I know I heard you say the other day you might be sneaking into Alumni Gym for some basketball games. So we're hoping to, see you possibly in disguise around campus. I don't know, at some sporting events. But I'm curious, having watched the coaches in action through the years, right? I mean, what do you kind of maybe learn from watching them manage their teams and about, and I know you say it's one of the most challenging professions around, right?
Yeah. What I have come to understand by being really closely involved in the athletics here is I think coaching is one of the hardest jobs on any college campus because you have to have a technical mastery of the sport, like the X's and O's, how to run plays, etc. But you also have to be really, really good at motivating human beings, which means starting with being curious about what matters to them, paying attention to them. And athletics is a very emotional zone. And how do you keep a player who may not be getting all the playing time but is absolutely key to how the team works in practice and gets ready for games? How do you create a positive team culture where everybody is pulling for everybody else? How do you figure out how to operate in the clutch? Because you could be a good coach and a good recruiter. Recruiting is also a very complex undertaking, especially when you don't have athletic scholarships. So how do you get out and see the developing high school players? How do you know who's going to convert into a good college player? You may recruit somebody, they may get injured. I mean, it is very complex. I think it's way easier to be a college president, let me tell you, than being an athletic coach. But I've learned a lot from them. We even had Allison Montgomery, the coach of the women's basketball team, come to talk to our senior managers at Bates in the President's Council, which is a group of about 80 people. And we had her give a presentation on leadership And honestly, it's one of the best presentations I've heard in my 11 years at Bates. So I'm learning every day from them.
Awesome. Well, just to wrap things up, kind of, any other thoughts, you wanted to share about your time as Bates president from an athletics perspective or not, you wanted to mention that we haven't got to talk about yet?
I think we've covered how I think about athletics. I should also say I've had equally wonderful experiences going to theater productions. I love when students write to me. So I'm just, if any students hear this, tell you to write to Gary Jenkins and say, would you come see my play? It's really fun. Dance concerts. I didn't know a lot about dance. I spent some time with Carol Dilley, who is head of the dance program, and she educated me. Lectures. I just think a liberal arts campus is such a wonderful playground for curious people who like to learn. And I have thoroughly enjoyed every aspect of the experience.
Excellent. Outgoing president of Bates College, Clayton Spencer, thank you so much for joining us once again on the Bobcast.
Thank you, Aaron. You do a great job with this.
This is the final episode of the Bobcast for the school year, but we'll be back in the fall. Thank you all for tuning in all season to the Bates Bobcast.
Right till the end of every game. Right